This work is one that I created out of sheer love, to go beyond and to apply every single thing I have learnt so far in my artistic journey. My biggest inspiration behind this work are the works of Master Ivan Loganov. I wanted to create something in the same philosophy as well. Before I begin this work, I visualize how I want it to turn out. My key focus was to render face, hands, and his legs the most. Everything else comes into focus later. I begin by sketching out the entire figure and getting the proportions right, being very careful with it, as I knew that messing up here would give me a headache later when it comes to likeliness. I have primarily used craft pencil here. The variety of edges it provides is really helpful depending upon its size. I keep changing the paper texture as well to incorporate different textures into it. After I have sketched out, I toned the canvas using low opacity watercolour brushes. The texture influence in watercolour was high, as that gives birth to a very realistic texture, as if real watercolour has influenced real paper. Now I start working on the figure. I wanted to work area by area and move on to the next area once the prior one is completed. I chose the head as that was the first and the primary focus of the whole figure. Using watercolours and pastels, I slowly but steadily pushed the values darker and darker, till the whole head had a very low-key value structure. Rendering was happening simultaneously using thin strokes of lines, using pentel pencil and charcoal brushes. It was an interesting intermix of texture. As you can also see, the structure of the head keeps changing, till I was satisfied that it didn't need any more rendering. The product of such low-key value structure and highly detailed rendering is a beautiful portrait. Achieving this felt as if I have broken through my previous limits. Now, as I went further down the rendering of form, I carefully rendered model's right arm and chest by giving it a wash using a watercolour brush, letting it dry and create darkened edges, and then further work upon it as well. You will notice that, through his right chest to his left chest, follows a gradient of value. That was my artistic choice, where I wanted to indicate where the flow of blood is most prominent and show the local value changes in the human body. Now comes the time where I start working on the model's left side of the body, where his chest, arm, and his interesting position holding a hammer and a boot lies. Slowly working towards the hands, following the same procedure as above, watercolour wash and start rendering using charcoal and pastels. I found such a method to be quite easy. The key here is the edges of watercolour and how fast it absorbs. That makes the process much more stable and predictable. Working on the hands was quite a daunting task, as I had a lot of trouble in getting the values right, and give it form ultimately. After a lot of erasing, lightening the values and darkening them again, I had finally gotten them right. After hands, I start working on the hammer, which had a handle that was red in colour. I originally didn't want it to be red in colour, as the whole painting is monochrome. I had a change of heart and thought that adding some colour would make the entire composition interesting and visually popping to the viewer's eyes. Here I start working on the boots he was holding. Only a few brush strokes of watercolour were enough to give it the look that I had been looking for, although a little more rendering on it didn't hurt the overall feeling. I also visualised what the model would look like if he was wearing shorts. The goal behind it was to erase the area where he would, in imagination, be wearing shorts. It resulted in shorts that were blended perfectly in with the background value. Once that was done, I worked on the left leg of the model. I didn't render the right leg and let it become almost one with the background, as that gives the entire atmosphere 3D depth. This is a trick I observed Ivan Loginov use in one of his skull studies. In the last stages of the painting, I worked on a bench the model was sitting on, and the shadows being casted, as I didn't want the whole context to feel two-dimensional. After figuring out and observing I had found no such improvements that could be made, especially in composition, I rendered the painting to my heart's content. Seeing the end product made me feel proud. I was reminded of the reasons I create paintings, which are happiness and satisfaction of bringing life to internal ideas. That is it for today's narration. I will see you later. Love, Van.